Welcome to Shaman Sister Sessions, episode 133, Systemic Trauma. So, trauma from the system, by the system, for the system. I'm Catherine Bird. I'm here with Michelle Huck, and this is our election edition episode, just post-election. So we're really happy to be here with you and hope that this episode is supportive. And how you doing, Michelle?
I'm okay. I'm better now than I was a week ago. I feel like I've had a little bit of a chance. And also, just for reference, people, we're recording this on November 11th. So almost a week after Disaster Election 2.0. And I'll call it that because when Kat and I first started the podcast, it was in, I think, October, or it was fall of 2016. So it was right before Disaster Election 1.0. So it was actually a very early episode that we recorded talking about Dark Night of the Soul initiations in light of the first time that Trump got elected. And so I'm okay. I came out of 7 consecutive days of client retreat that I actually had during the election experience, and that was very intense.
Which I could not understand what you were thinking in that moment of booking that stuff. That when I heard that you were going to be in retreat that whole time, I was impressed because I knew that I could not. I was not going to be. I would not have been up for it. I was anxious. I was anxious until the next day. I started having other feelings, but I have felt so much anxiety in my body for several days beforehand. So, yeah, Michelle, I think that was a superhuman feat to pull that off.
Thank you. That wasn't necessarily my first pick of timing, but that's just kind of how it worked out. I had 4 days of alchemy retreat and then a one-on-one client retreat that originally was scheduled for about a week later and then got moved according to that person's travel plans. So and I didn't realize until after we had the date set that I was like, oh, that's during the election. Oh, I'm sure everything will be fine. And indeed it was not fine. So here we are. I have decompressed. I full on collapsed a little bit after my client left. And because I felt like I couldn't really actually feel all my feelings while that person was here. And I took the weekend and I did some painting and I danced and I sang and I'm feeling much better now. So here we are in light of looking at what the heck is happening. And in case it was not very, very obvious, Kat and I are both, very liberal, pro supporting people, pro supporting the earth, pro taking care of people and beings, and definitely not for whatever the heck is happening right now in terms of some political shitstorm going on. So just so you know where we stand on that.
Yeah, we don't talk politics a ton on here because it's not the focus of our programming, but politics affects everything. Me personally, I am very political, very politically informed. I have always been since I was a little kid. I grew up in a home that was very leftist and very politically involved and oriented in social justice issues and helping humans. And I am a lefty McLeftist of the leftists. And there is, just so you know, there is nothing, absolutely nothing that can be said that will make me be able to see Trump in a beneficial, positive light, other than death and destruction is a portal and a gateway to new possibilities.
Which is part of what we're here to talk about today. And then all of the rest of that, we'll be recording a follow-up episode to this actually about how to, it's okay to know what your political or what the political and social and medical, et cetera, views of your practitioners are. So stay tuned for that episode because both Kat and I have been writing about that recently. But for today, we're looking at systemic trauma and we're looking at, okay, here, and frankly, I was obviously very much hoping that Kamala would win, and I thought she would, but also I thought Hillary would win in 2016, and I was wrong then. Looking at how the heck did this happen, really? And I feel like I've been reflecting a lot recently on our collective trauma story. And when I say that, I mean, and like our history, our trauma history as a country in the United States, and looking at, okay, where did we come from? How did we collectively, as a, the modern Western identity that we are now, how did we get to be here? And how the heck is all of that underlying trauma perhaps definitely underpinning the current socio-political shitstorm that we're in now? It definitely is. And looking at this in light of my own experience in simultaneously the shamanic and alchemical realms, and then also looking at this through the lens of trauma theory, trauma healing, etc. And so that's what we're here to talk about today. Super fun. Yay.
But this is so valuable because, especially in America, we have chosen to discount, dismiss, to ignore our history, to ignore our past, and to ignore where we have come from. And we've seen this even in looking at Ron DeSantis's Florida and Texas and places where people are actively working to keep history out of the history books. That we're not educating people as to the true origin stories of this nation. And when you take the time to educate yourself and read books about what really went down as this nation was formed, and for hundreds of years, you will find extreme stories, extreme trauma. You will find things that you will take your breath away, that you will not believe that humans could be so horrible to each other. And we're actually not that different. Some of us have evolved, but there is a portion of our population that really isn't that different. And who would do those exact same things to other humans today? And I think that in some ways there's some confrontation with that for us to see, oh, okay, there are a lot of people who would choose to not protect another human when it came down to it, who could make an excuse and come up with a reason for not feeding kids, or for putting immigrants in camps, or for making hate speech more acceptable, or violence more acceptable against marginalized communities. There are a lot of people who can come up with reasons that in their brain are logical for those things to happen, or can create enough cognitive dissonance that they actually don't believe those things are happening. Like they could see something, hear something with their own eyes and ears and still not believe it.
I think that is a really important distinction there. And I do believe that more people are probably in the latter category. Like, I think when it comes down to it, that most people are not out to be like, yeah, actively, I want to cause harm. But I think there's a lot of ignorance in terms of, it seems to me, based on the pulse and the vibe that I'm getting out there, is people just do not understand the concrete reality of these policies that Trump is really standing for, and internment camps, and taking away food programs, and taking away the reproductive freedom and rights of women, and all of this. Like, you use the term cognitive dissonance, and I would say, in addition, there's like this obliviousness or ignorance, or just totally not computing that actually is a reality that does still exist today. And I think that the whole not talking about history piece is, it's really the most effective tool in kind of brainwashing the majority of people into believing that those things don't happen and couldn't possibly happen here because we're so modern and enlightened, which is not true, or
Yeah.
definitely not true. Yeah. So this, again, I don't think the majority of people are actively wanting to cause harm. There are definitely those people too, but I think the majority, again, it's this ignorance, obliviousness, cognitive dissonance, denial,
Yeah.
and that doesn't make it better. It just is a different flavor of the trauma spectrum that
Right.
people are on.
I think though that
Mhm.
as empathetic people who are really connected to empathy, that
Mhm.
we have to also be aware that we give non-empathetic people a lot more credit than they deserve, because
Mhm.
we make an assumption that our empathetic experience is something that they can access, that
Mm.
they are accessing. And
That's a really great point. I want to kind of underline that there because I recognized what you just said and or what you are saying and what I just said, and because it's so unfathomable to me that people would not care.
right.
But I think you're right. There's that too. So I'm recognizing my own bias here for a moment. Carry on, Kat. Just
Well,
a
I think
moment,
that's
light
also
bulb
like
moment.
what you're saying as far as it's unfathomable that people would not care. I think that that can
Mm-hmm.
be a little bit of the internal crazy making that we experience inside of, if we're looking at the systematic trauma, we're looking
Mm-hmm.
at the nation, the political sphere, all of this, everything that's happening in our society as kind of our own little dysfunctional family that we're all a part of. And we're all siblings in this dysfunctional family. And when you look at dysfunctional family dynamics, and there are narcissists running things, and people with personality disorders, there's addictions, there's
Mm-hmm.
anger, there's rage, there's all of these things come in, and they affect different people differently. And some people shut down, and they align actually with their abuser. Some people become their own worst enemy and fall into their own addictions and disorders and things that harm themselves. Some people kind of see themselves and wonder, how did I end up in this family? Why do I seem to feel like I can see the dysfunction and nobody else is even acknowledging that this
Mm-hmm.
dysfunction is occurring? And I think that some of that internal crazy making, and if you've come from a dysfunctional family and you've had that experience inside yourself and been like, why eating my Cheerios am I able to feel like I understand what's going on here better than the grown-ups in the room? It can
Mm-hmm.
feel like you're back in your own dysfunctional family, which, we have to acknowledge that when we're dealing with systematic trauma, it is going to also trigger our own personal trauma, our family wounds, the things that we've personally struggled with in our life as well. If we've had DV situations, if we've been in relationships that have been harmful,
Yeah.
all of that's going to also come to the surface in terms of our relationship to the systematic stuff.
That's a really great point. I think that um, just keeping all of that in mind as we're looking at this big dysfunctional family of a country that we're in. Yeah. The looking let's look back at our history, our collective history here for a moment. And of course, our history as a country is far longer than just the last couple hundred, 250 something years, right? So like we definitely go back farther than that. And yet it's almost as though people have the idea that history of the United States began in 1776, and obviously we know that's not true. And so we have this really like I think our history is characterized by erasure, right? Of erasing the inconvenient pieces that came before. So erasing the fact that, oh, there were indigenous people here for a super long time, for millennia before people ever came over from Europe. So kind of conveniently erasing that fact, which obviously like they're still here, and but kind of neglecting, oh yeah, there's this other part of pre-signing Declaration of Independence, pre-European immigrant history. And then there's, okay, like discovery of the Americas by Europeans coming over, that like epoch of becoming, again, I'm putting all of this in quotes, so if you're listening on Spotify or whatever, please recognize like the quotiness of this, the relevancy of the Americas in the context of European understanding, with the quote discovery, and then immigration starting to come over from Europe. And in terms of my own like personal understanding, I do come from mixed European ancestry and then some gray area ancestry in there. But like I can think back to my great grandparents on my mother's side. Those I know more about my mother's side than about my father's side. Coming over, my great grandmother from Ukraine, my great grandfather from Russia, and thinking about, okay, so a lot of people coming over from Europe, like those weren't necessarily happy, fun, exploratory stories either. So there's even the
Yeah, I
right.
mean,
It's not like, oh
sometimes we
yay,
don't
I'm
think
gonna
of that, right? We're like, oh, and then my ancestors came over,
right.
and we're thinking, oh, yeah, our ancestors came over because they were, for the most part, fleeing
Forced.
tyranny, fleeing oppression, fleeing starvation, fleeing
Yeah.
trauma. So we took a bunch of traumatized
Yeah.
people, we stuck them on boats, and we brought them over
Right.
here. And even in the
Right.
beginning, when we shipped, England was shipping
Mhm.
criminals over here, people that they did not find that they didn't find that they fit in some kind of way. They were just shipping them off because they didn't have resources for them. And it was
Yeah.
actually easier for them to put them on a boat and put them to work someplace else than it was to try to deal with them in the crowd of London.
Yeah, exactly. So there's this, I think that's a very romantic view about the immigrants who came over, and it's so far from reality. And of course, this is well after like the beginning of the genocide of the indigenous peoples who were here, and of course in conjunction also with bringing over enslaved Africans to work in the plantations and all of this, right? But in terms of, I'm talking more recently because this is what I have like more personal connection to, and I know a lot of people tuning into this, like maybe you come from a family of immigrants, maybe your ancestors have been here for a long time, maybe you have indigenous ancestry. Like no matter where you are in your ancestral profile, I think it's pretty fair to say that like there's nobody here who's here, meaning in this country, whose lineage has not been touched by trauma at some point in that journey. Whether you were here, your people were here as some of the indigenous land stewards of this area, or again, like your European ancestors fled over here, or your African ancestors were shipped over here, whatever it is. Like it is a horrible, excruciating, for the most part, everybody's here as a like, or everybody who immigrated here came not necessarily as like their best choice option, or as their first choice option. I don't know, maybe it was for some people, but I'm just
For
thinking of my
some
own
people, but
ancestors of
the
like,
majority
so
of
yeah, some people,
people would rather stay in their homeland. Like
yeah,
especially when we demonize immigrants, like immigrants generally are going to a place because they are seeking a better life for their children. And
yeah,
because they cannot uh, get the life, the resources, the food, the safety that they need in their homeland, most people, unless they're really like, I'm an explorer and I just want to see the world,
yeah,
would love to just stay in their homeland and be in their community and have their traditions and have their language and have all of these things. And I think this
right,
erasure piece is like you're talking about, is that we've erased our own lineages. Especially as Western people, we've erased our own lineages. People came here
Mhm.
and they knew that it was dangerous not to assimilate into being an
Right.
American, and dropped their traditions, their cultures, their languages, the things that made them a part of a community in their homeland. Now
Right.
they have had to assimilate, and that
Even
also
their
is traumatizing.
names. I mean, coming through Ellis Island, like, oh, you can't keep your name. Like, you have to have an American name now. And
Yeah.
so, and you need to either change the spelling, get a whole new name. It's very that I mean, that's not good for anybody. Like erasing the history and the context that we come from. And I think that erasure really has set the stage for this modern cultural identity that we have, that really makes space for this oh, I pulled myself up by my bootstraps. Like I didn't, nobody helped me. I didn't come from anywhere. And I think people can say that because they are so disconnected from, well, where did we come from? Who did we come from? How did we get here? Like nobody who is actually connected to their lineage and their ancestry and their cultural, personal and cultural and societal history recognize, can ever say, I did this by myself. It's this
Mhm.
weird like hyper individualization that I should say hyper individualization can only occur in societies that are not connected to their histories and lineages.
Hmm.
And we have that on a like an epidemic level here in the United States, this hyper individualization that we saw during COVID, people being totally wigged out about like wearing a mask just to prevent the spread and slow the spread. Oh, but it's impinging upon my personal medical freedom. Okay, well, if it helps somebody else not get sick, like, can you look beyond your own personal hyper individualized medical sovereignty and just wear a mask anyway in the grocery store? Not a huge deal, right? And then looking at other countries where where there is much more emphasis on collective health and well-being and collective identity, things like that are much more readily acceptable. So it's this really interesting particular mix of again, this systemic trauma and our like culturally rewarded identity structures about like the cowboy revolutionary do it myself, go against the grain, that I think has really allowed for this particular situation that we're in right now. And it's not a
Right.
good thing.
Well, and it's allowed also for the kind of idol worship that we see of billionaires and people that have, on the backs of other humans, have created wealth, who are unwilling to contribute positive benefit to society, but still feel that they deserve to be billionaires. We can see that people worship that. They want that. They see that as the American dream, that the American dream is built on manifest destiny, which basically says that God is telling us that we deserve the land. We deserve to pull the resources from the land. We deserve to do whatever we want with the people who were already on that land. We deserve to take over and take dominion and take control. And that is a huge part of what this country was founded on. And it is still what people are, in a lot of ways, shouting that somehow, through for no reason, that I deserve to have. And this
Mm-hmm.
means that I'm scrambling on the backs of other people instead of looking at a different way of engaging in culture, society that is
Mm-hmm.
community oriented, that cares deeply for the least among us, that cares deeply for the people who are sick, people who are disabled, for the children, for the women, for those that are struggling, the elderly, those that have given their lives to the country in war and have become injured, that we in a sane and healthy society, we would prioritize. But we've been taught some kind of crazy thing that I'm actually the priority, and that has been manipulated into making into actually something that the rich and powerful can use to get people to be on their side. So they're the only ones winning, and all of this, the only people really winning, like people think that they've won, the only people winning are billionaires and CEOs.
Yeah, but they're not really winning because they're dead inside, right? Um, that's a separate issue.
That's a
Anyway,
separate episode. When you're dead inside, but you think you're winning.
right? Yeah, it's and you die alone with your billions of dollars, right? Okay,
Right.
so
Can we talk about like what do we do with this? Like, okay, we know that hurt people, right? That's a famous saying.
yeah.
And we know that the trauma that we have endured in our past, in our history, in our lineages comes around and helps us to feel justified and okay with experiencing the trauma of other people or enacting trauma on other people. That is the
Mhm.
cycle of abuse and trauma that plays itself out in families generation after generation after generation. But guess what? We are here to break generational cycles of trauma, and we are doing it in this country right this minute, even though it doesn't look that way.
Woohoo! Okay, so what do we do with that? That's a great question. I think there's first and foremost there's the reckoning that we're doing right now and I feel like I did that, I feel like I've been through various phases of this, like in 2016. Okay, this is our collective wake up moment. And we kind of did a little bit, but not really. And then when COVID, okay, here's our collective wake up moment. And then there was like a little bit, but not enough. And now here we are again. People, here's our collective wake up moment. So the reckoning of our collective trauma identity, the reckoning of that outrageous selfishness and the entitlement, that comes from this manifest destiny culture that Kat was talking about, and now there's this looking at, all right, if we actually voted Trump into office, which I'm not 100% convinced actually happened. That's
We'll see.
a
We'll
separate
see. We'll see.
We'll see if he
We'll
actually makes
see.
it into office.
Listen,
Right.
we've got 2 months to really see if that's going to happen.
Right. Kat and I have had some private conversations about that, and I don't know if I'm ready to actually release an episode to that effect yet, but we'll bookmark that. But for now, looking at like, okay, it seems that this person has won this election. Fuck. And here we are. What do we do with that? Okay, there's this, this recognizing and reckoning with our collective trauma identity. Okay, we're slowly coming to terms with that. We're doing that. And then, looking at, I love to look at this, of course, through the lens of the shamanic and alchemical philosophy of, okay, we are living out the structures, like the etheric architecture of this country is built on horrifying trauma. So looking at this through the alchemical lens, we look at, like Kat mentioned at the very beginning of the episode, okay, here's this really beautiful opportunity for dismantling the rotten parts of the structure, bringing death, bringing really like intentional, compassionate death to the diseased, rotting architecture of these systems and structures, and bringing it through this transformational process, this alchemical process of purification and then rebirth. Like that's easy to think about. And then how do we actually do that? What are we working on?
Right.
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 Yeah.
I mean, I think number one is that we have to acknowledge that everything that is outside of us is within us, and that these systems of oppression are within us. The hierarchies of oppression that we engage in every single day are within us, and that we have to do our inner work. We have to do our anti-racism work. We have to do work to discover the parts of us that are unaccepting of people who are different. We have to look at what we've been taught to believe from our parents and our grandparents and our schools and our churches and our communities. And we have to question ourselves. And
I think I want to like even just take it back a step further to like, okay, can we actually be in our own presence without squirming away or looking at our phones or like distracting ourselves? Like, is it possible for us to actually be, just be? And for most people, the answer is no, because there's this very high level of nervous system dysregulation, very high level of distraction and like disrupting influences that causes us to constantly be out, 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 out. So yes, you know, I want to say yes and, Kat, to everything that you said, yes and to all of that. And yet, if we can't actually just sit in our own company and our own presence without shrinking away, then there's that too, because if we can't be present here, then it's really impossible for us to be present with
yeah.
anything.
Well, we
Yeah.
have to be in, in order to do those things, we have to be doing our practices, be in self-care, healing our
Yep.
nervous system, healing our personal lived trauma from this lifetime so that we can, like you're saying, be safe enough
Yep.
inside of our body that we can be present with things from the past. And you have to be honest with yourself about where you're at right now. And some
Mm-hmm.
people are in such a vulnerable place right now. You're scared, you're trying to figure out if you need to move your house, you're worried about your family, your kids. Your personal nervous system regulation and self-care is the number one priority before you can go into a lot of things. So
Yeah.
I think being really honest with yourself about where you're at and what you need right this minute, and then also not letting yourself off the hook too.
Mm-hmm.
Like really being, like I said, just like honest, like where am I, what could awaken within me. And I think you said something, Michelle, earlier. You just said, like, what is the opportunity? And that is what we always have to look at from the alchemical perspective, from the shamanic perspective, from the permaculture perspective of what's going on in the
Mm-hmm.
ecosystem. Is this is seems like the worst thing that could happen, or this seems like it's a defect or a disorder in the system. How can I see that as an opportunity? An opportunity for my personal growth, an opportunity for collective growth, which means community growth.
Yeah, absolutely. You just said something I want to like spell out for people a little bit there. You said personal growth, community growth, collective growth, not necessarily in that order. And I think this is, in our previous couple of episodes, we've talked about healing. So if you, in case you missed those, go back and tune in there. We talked about, how do I heal myself, the personal healing journey. And then we also did an episode on collective and planetary healing as well. And again, we recorded both of those before the election. So it's like we were priming to talk about this. And I think that that's a really important piece of we keep one foot in the I am, okay, my own personal healing, my own personal trauma history and reconciliation, and developmental trauma. And we keep a foot in the we are, in this case, we have 3 feet, we're a tripod. So we can keep a foot in the we are of our community, our family, our ancestral, our lineage healing, our, our close circle. And then we keep one in the all is, in the planetary healing, in the larger systems and structures, in the global overview, the ecological imperative of supporting global reforestation and environmental conditions, and our global society. So I think there's really this and of course, where you're at, and we talked about this in the previous episode, just where you're at in your own personal attention, your focus is going to be different on those different layers at any given moment in your life, according to whatever health challenges or personal challenges you're experiencing at that time. But I think there's this taking a certain degree of like joyful responsibility in terms of I heard someone sing this song the other day and it really irritated me because the song, and they meant it in this inspiring and connecting way. And the song was Help is on the Way. And I heard that and I was like, no, that's some of that letting ourselves off the hook piece. And help is not on the way. It's not like there's some sort of outside influence that's going to necessarily come in. Of course, I'm open to divine intervention and spiritual
Right.
intervention, but we can't exclusively rely on that as this external savior mechanism.
Right.
Help is here inside me, inside myself. I am the help that is here. My own heart, my own words, my actions, my convictions, my efforts is the help that I can offer to my global community through my commitment to, like Kat was saying, that internal, holding within ourselves as the microcosm of the fractals of all of consciousness, healing within myself the systems of oppression that I see in the world, healing within myself the relationship to misogyny and racism and totalitarianism, authoritarianism, and all of these things. And again, that honesty. I am the help that I can give the world, not anything outside of us, not anything outside of me. Me as a being, how can I serve through my life? How can my life be a prayer in devotion for all beings, for the health and well-being and thriving, radiant aliveness of all beings on earth and of the earth herself? How can I live as the help that I want the world to receive? That's the song I want to hear.
I love it, Michelle.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I guess that's it, really, is what we're saying is work on yourself.
But more
work
than
on
that,
your community, right? Work on your service, right? And the awareness that this is about collective liberation. You are not a special thing that is going to evolve to the 5th or the 11th or the 47th dimension and leave all of these plebeians behind you. We are all in this together. We are all evolving, growing together. And where anyone is not liberated, everyone is not liberated. And that liberation begins at home and is in the community. Yes, what?
That was the other episode that we were supposed to record. It was on like the ascension illusion. Yeah.
No, well, we'll do that later. There's so much more to say about that particular thing. I will not be silenced on that particular topic for definitely many minutes. So,
oh yeah, no, that's great. No, we were talking about this several days ago or something. I was like, oh, we need to record that as an episode, and then we were sitting down to record now. Like, wait, what are we talking about? That was one of them. So thank you for remembering.
That was it. We forget what we're gonna do these episodes on until right before we do them.
Well, just because we have so many great conversations, we're like, oh, we should talk about that on the podcast, and then we need to write them down. So let's write that down after we're done. Anyway, you can all circle back for the ascension illusion and the false promise of ascending to the 5th dimension and leaving all of your basic ass sheep planetary cohort behind. That's not a thing. Right. We'll circle back on that later. But for now, I want to add in another piece of what do we do? And I've seen this floating around. There's a whole bunch of memes. Everybody's tuned into like what's going on all the social media platforms, and everybody's posting all the memes. And one of them is around like the paradox of intolerance or the tolerance paradox. And Kat, you've seen that one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. In case you haven't seen that one, people who are tuning in, the paradox of intolerance or tolerance, whatever it's called, is the idea that in a tolerant society, which, we live in a pretty tolerant society. And I want to say particularly within the, left, liberal, personal development, neo-spiritual community, we are generally pretty tolerant. We're like, don't judge other people. Don't make other people bad or wrong. Like everyone's allowed to have their own experience, like very, very tolerant. The paradox is that in a tolerant society, it actually becomes easier for intolerance to grow and go unchecked. Because then if you live in a structured, like, we live in this community, the neo-spiritual community that's like, oh, everyone can have their own opinion, then it becomes easier for some asshat to come in and say like really horrifying things, like this guy whose name I won't even say, who did the video, Your Body, My Choice, that went totally viral, is bonkers, right? So it becomes really easy for some neo-Nazi like that to come in and say these horrible things. And then
that guy has been tolerated for years and years and years. That guy was at dinner with Donald Trump and Mar-a-Lago. That guy has been accepted and uplifted by the men of this society for a long time. So he feels emboldened to be abusive.
Yep. And it didn't happen overnight. It happened over a prolonged period of allowing people to, to have their hate and to express their hate, and we let it go unchecked because we are a tolerant society. And I don't hang out with that dude personally, but there are people that I do hang out with that I'm like, okay, maybe I don't need to let that comment slide anymore. Maybe I don't need to, take for granted that they actually mean well when they're saying X, Y, Z. So, I think there's like this warriorship initiation happening for us collectively about, what? Yes, I do firmly believe in advocating for peace and for connection and for unity and for alignment and like cohesion between our global community, and also unfuckwithability of you do not get to come in and spread your hate all over the place. Like, that's actually not okay. So I think there's this, it feels to me like one of the interesting frequencies happening is, and then the other piece that's like the paradoxical inverse of this is among, like, I've just been very fascinated to look at conservatives. I'm like, wow, it's so easy. It seems so easy that conservatives all unite together. And here among liberals, we're like tearing each other new ones over every little thing, right? Why is that so much harder for liberals to actually come together as a cohesive unit? So I'm like, yes, let's be more cohesive, but also let's not tolerate the bullshit. And I haven't quite figured out exactly what the synthesis of that looks like internally, but I want to invite people into awareness of it is okay, and actually it's beyond okay. It is fundamentally necessary to not allow hatred to gain a foothold and not just sit by under the guise of, okay, light and love, peace and love, all the whatever white light shame, weirdness people are putting that under, but to actually say, you know what, that's not okay. And I will not stand for that. I'm standing here with the sword of truth in my hand as the warrior that I am. And I'm saying no to that.
Yeah. I mean, I think, I wrote something on my Facebook page today because there's so many calls for unity. Mostly those people voted for Trump. So, but it is not necessary in the name of unity to unify with your oppressor or to unify with someone who is oppressing someone else. And this is a very common trauma bond thing to do, which is to accept kind words and kind gestures from your oppressor or your abuser and stay in a situation much longer than you should have, or to accept the abuse of someone else. People allow other people to abuse their own children because of trauma bonding and dysfunctional relationship dynamics that exist throughout generations. And so we have to see where being nice, being the nice guy, because we're nice, right? Love, light, unity, consciousness. We're the nice guys. So, but we have to see where that can be exploited for us to align with something that is not healthy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is, I would just want to add in one more little note here, Kat. That was really great. Some of our own shadow conditioning that can contribute to this, particularly are recovering people pleaser people. And, people who are conflict avoidant, like, oh, I don't want to rock the boat. Right. And so again, this is a good opportunity to be honest with yourself about, like, what are my own particular character traits where I might completely unintentionally actually be in support of perpetuating this stuff. And again, this is not a call out, this is a call up invitation. I've gotten much better about this. I'm a recovering people pleaser, recovering conflict avoidant person. I'm much more comfortable about this than I used to be. And yet it's still an edge for me to actually lean into, you know what, I'm going to say something in a situation where otherwise I might have let it slide. So, invitation to all of you out there, if you know that this is you. I'm also going to invite, call in some of our guides who are here to support us in this. Like Archangel Michael is the warrior angel. He's the, I work with Archangel Michael as a patron guide of mine, and he is here to support us in our healthy warriorship. He is here to help us take up the sword and to stand for peace and to embrace deliberate warrior action in service to peace. So there are many warrior guides out there. There's warrior gods and goddesses and many different traditions who are also here to help us embrace that. And so pick your favorite if you want more information about that. I don't know, Kat, maybe we need to record an episode about that. I think that'd be cool. Spiritual forces to work with for the revolution. Who are the guides?
Exactly. Let's start working with the goddesses. Okay.
Great. Awesome.
Thanks, Michelle.
Okay. So yeah.
Do you
So
want to do let's do a dedication.
Okay. Let's do a prayer right now. Awesome. And for all of you tuning in, I invite you to go ahead and place a hand on your heart and a hand on your belly or your solar plexus. So a heart and your solar plexus. And I invite you to close your eyes. And let's take a couple of deep breaths into the belly and out. One more deep breath in and out. And if you would like to follow along, then go ahead and invite to yourself, yes, I am asking to receive this prayer on my behalf. I am participating in this prayer. It is with so much gratitude that we call upon and invoke the power and the presence of our own warrior hearts. We invite and invoke the power and the presence of those guides and teachers of peaceful warriorship, of justice, of compassionate service, in righteousness, integrity, discernment. Archangel Michael, Yansa, Athena, Ogun, and all of the guides and teachers who are warriors of love, we invite and invoke you and ask you to please be present here with us in this moment that is now to help us awaken and cultivate within ourselves our own warrior hearts. Please help us to take up the sword of compassionate service, the sword of integrity and righteousness, and hold it in our hands with trust and confidence and alignment, knowing that we may use this sword as we see in the world to eradicate intolerance, hatred, injustice, and those who would take advantage of or those who would abuse or harm for their own personal benefit or gain. We ask for support from the warrior forces to please help cultivate within us this discernment and to stand in our own love in our hearts and allow us to serve from that love, to cultivate love, to grow love, and to stand for love and be a champion of love in the world for the benefit of all beings everywhere. We, the warriors, stand together. We are here. Thank you, thank you, thank you for the blessings.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you,
welcome.
everyone, for showing up and for being in this kind of warriorship and understanding that this is what we came for. And we're here together.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you.
What else? If you want to come and work with us, come and work with us. We've got michellehogg.com, katherinebird.com. I'm working on, I don't know when this will be posted. I might have already started my Heal Thyself program. It might have just begun. You might still be able to squeak in the door on self-healing, somatic, energetic, and spiritual healing practices and tools and support to transform now. Michelle, what do you got? What do you got?
Alchemy and one-on-one mentorship. So as I mentioned, the alchemical philosophy and practice of transmutation is really honestly like the best tool I see for us to move forward collectively as a society and tear apart the structures and systems that are not working so that we can build new ones in our lives and in the world. So I teach a 200-hour alchemy certification training program that is a year-long deep dive into the mysteries of the practical application of spiritual technology based in ancient wisdoms and universal truth. So if that calls to you and you want to delve into these mysteries for yourself and your life and the world, then you can find that through my website, michellehogg.com. There's also a free guide to the stages of alchemy that you can download from my website if you're curious about that and just want to dip your toe in the water. And then if you're ready for more, I'm currently taking applications for the 2025 cohort of the alchemy course. Yay.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you. Awesome, everybody. Go ahead and drop a like, drop a follow, comment, and please feel free to share this episode with anyone who needs to hear that message. And we would love to hear from you how that landed for you. Be well, be easy on yourselves, and we've got this.